She was dancing in the rain, alone, outside a hospital, past 11 at night. Not because she was happy, not because she had lost her mind, because someone had just walked into her lab in front of her entire team and destroyed everything she had built. 6 months of work. Gone. And while he did it, he told her she never should have been there. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She filed her complaint. And then she went outside and she danced. Because that is what she does when something tries to break her. She had no idea anyone was watching. The Korean Mafia boss was standing at the courtyard entrance, getting rained on, still, silent. He had been there for 4 minutes before she knew. He watched a woman who had just had everything taken move like it hadn't touched her. What happened when she turned around is why you're here. If you're new here, this is Afro-Korean Noir Stories. We tell stories that don't let go. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and don't skip anything. Now, let's get into it. Dr. Lim Hee-won didn't knock. The laboratory door swung open, and he was already inside, 3 colleagues behind him, hands in his pockets, face carrying the expression of a man who had made a decision before he left his office. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed. Rain had started against the window an hour ago. Kazuya Osebonsu didn't look up immediately. She had been in this room for 19 hours. Her preliminary findings, 3 months of data sat printed and organized in front of her. The most important work of her career, ready for the first time to be seen. She looked up. He walked past her without a word. He reached her primary testing equipment, the nerve conduction analyzer she'd shipped from Atlanta at her own expense, the machine she'd calibrated over 5 months, the tool without which her research could not continue. He picked it up with both hands. He dropped it on the floor. The sound it made was specific, not an explosion, worse. A precise collapse components separating from components. Glass meeting tile, 5 months of calibrated settings becoming silence in a single second. The kind of sound that means something is gone. Nobody moved. He spoke in Korean, slow, clear. He knew she understood every word. He said her methodology was an embarrassment. He said her fellowship was a diversity gesture, not a merit appointment. He said the department would function considerably better without her presence. His 3 colleagues stood behind him and said nothing. Kazuya looked at the broken pieces on the floor. 1 second, 2, 3. She looked at Lim. "Pick it up," she said. He didn't pick it up. He turned and walked out. His colleagues followed. The door closed. She stood alone under the buzzing light with rain against the window and 5 months of her life scattered across the cold tile. She pulled out her phone. She documented everything, every fragment, every angle, timestamp, written record. She filed a formal complaint with the director's office before she left the building. She emailed copies to her fellowship committee in Atlanta. Every detail in order, every paper trail intact. Then she went outside. The rain was cold. Not dramatic rain, just soul rain. Persistent, indifferent. The hospital's side courtyard was private. No cameras, no staff smoking area. Just wet stone, darkness, and the sound of water on leaves. She put her earphones in. She started to dance. You need to understand what that was. It wasn't performance. It wasn't breakdown. It was something older than either of those things, the specific movement of a person who has learned, through a lifetime of accumulating things the mind can't process sitting still, that the body sometimes has to go first. She'd been doing this since she was 9 years old. Whenever something happened, she couldn't speak, and couldn't cry, and couldn't hold still, she went outside. She moved. And the movement did what stillness couldn't. She danced with her eyes closed and her head back. Her feet found the wet stones. The rain soaked through her coat, and she didn't care. For 3 minutes, she was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere, the broken equipment and Lim's voice and the cold fluorescent light all fell away into something she could breathe through. Then she felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, a presence. The specific awareness of not being alone. She opened her eyes. A man was standing at the courtyard entrance, expensive coat, getting rained on. He'd clearly been there for some time. The water was dark across both shoulders. He wasn't embarrassed to be caught watching. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't immediately name. Not amusement, not pity. Not the particular condescension she'd learned to expect in certain rooms, the expression of someone who has already decided what they're going to see. Something else. Something that looked, oddly, like recognition. Like a man who had forgotten something and was just now remembering what it was. She took her earphones out. "The courtyard is private," she said. "No," he said. "It isn't." He turned and walked back inside. She stood in the rain. She looked at the empty doorway for a long moment. Then she went inside and found the night security desk. She asked as calmly as she could who the man in the expensive coat was. The guard's expression changed, in a specific way. The way it changes when someone is deciding how much information is appropriate. "That's Chairman Shin," he said carefully. "He owns the building." Keziah looked at the empty doorway. "Of course he does," she said. She was in Director Huang's office by 8 the next morning. Photographs, timestamps, the full written record of everything destroyed. Huang was apologetic the way a specific kind of man is. Apologetic language that sounds like commitment and contains none. Tone that suggests action and structure that ensures none will occur. He used the word times, process times, 4 times in 6 minutes. He suggested, gently, that the lab environment had perhaps been stressful for everyone. She filed the complaint anyway, for the record. She was still in the corridor when Dr. Yoon Soo-jin found her, 2 coffees. Warm, immediate anger on Keziah's behalf. She'd heard what happened everyone had heard. Lim had been running the department as a personal fiefdom for years. Keziah's research was the first genuinely significant work the fellowship had produced. "I'm glad you're here," Soo-jin said. Keziah received that carefully. 6 months in this building had taught her to receive warmth carefully. But Soo-jin was funny and direct, and seemed to have no agenda. Over the following 2 weeks, something developed between them that felt, honestly, genuinely like friendship. She would remember that feeling later. She would remember exactly how much it felt like the real thing. Here is what she didn't know about Dr. Yoon Soo-jin. She had known Shin Woo-jae for 2 years before Keziah ever arrived in Seoul. She had been watching this hallway. For a very specific reason. But Keziah didn't know that yet. That week, at a Hospital Foundation luncheon, Chairman Baek Sung-kyu introduced himself, CEO of Baek Pharma, Korea's largest pharmaceutical corporation, the primary financial backer of Hansung Medical Center's entire research division. He was charming, in the precise way of men who have learned that charm is more efficient than force. He knew her research. He expressed what sounded like genuine outrage about the equipment incident. He offered to replace everything immediately, personally. No paperwork. She thanked him. She declined. She wasn't sure exactly why. Something in the precision of his interest felt slightly too calibrated, like a man who'd rehearsed this version of himself too many times. She'd understand later. She'd understand everything, later. That same week, Shin Woo-jae came to the hospital twice. Both times, for legitimate reasons, the hospital sat on property his organization held interest in, with ongoing lease discussions. Both times he ended up near Keziah without appearing to arrange it. The second time she was in the cafeteria. He sat across from her without asking. "You're still here," he said. "It's my fellowship," she said. "Where else would I be?" Lim filed a counter-complaint, claiming you created a hostile work environment. She looked at him. "How do you know that?" "I know most things that happen in buildings I own," he said. "Then you know it's fabricated." "Yes," he said. And I'm telling you, so you know to prepare." He finished his coffee. He left. His cup sat on the table across from her. She didn't ask his name. He didn't offer it. She already knew it. This was the first thread. Not attraction. Not yet. Something stranger. Wariness that felt, inexplicably, like safety. Inspector Gong Tai-sik arrived 2 weeks later, Senior Inspector, Financial Crimes Unit. He was professional, reasonable, framing Keziah carefully as a potential victim of institutional fraud, not a subject. She answered his questions. Precisely. She cooperated fully. Afterward, she found herself telling Woo-jae. She wasn't entirely sure when that had started, telling Woo-jae. It had happened gradually, he appeared. She reported things. He listened without interrupting and said something that reframed whatever she'd told him in a way that was almost always useful. She hadn't decided to trust him. It had happened the way certain things happen. Quietly. Persistently. Until one day you look down and the ground is wet. But then her keycard stopped working. She arrived one morning and the door wouldn't open. Lim's counter-complaint had succeeded in one specific way, her laboratory access suspended overnight, pending review. She stood in the corridor outside her own lab, with 6 months of ongoing research sealed behind a door she could no longer enter. She called Sujin. Sujin came immediately. She held Kazuya's hand. Her outrage was warm and real. She didn't hear Wu-jae arrive. She only became aware of him when she noticed the security desk 3 doors down where he was standing, speaking to the security director with a quietness that was somehow more commanding than anything loud. He spoke for 90 seconds. He walked back. Her keycard worked again 30 seconds later. "Thank you," Kazuya said. "The lab is part of the lease agreement. Restricting access without board approval breaches the facility contract." "That's not why you did it," she said. He looked at her. He didn't answer. He kept walking. She watched him go. Behind her, Sujin watched her watching him. "Be careful," Sujin said quietly. An honest warning. Also something else. But Kazuya didn't know what else yet. That afternoon, an anonymous message appeared on her phone. A photograph, a falsified patient outcome report, filed 3 years ago, bearing Dr. Lim's name. A report that covered up a fatal medication error. No note, no sender. She didn't know who sent it. She didn't know it had been held for months, waiting for exactly this moment. She didn't know that every piece of apparent help she'd received was connected to something far larger that she couldn't yet see. What she knew was that she had it, and that records matter when everything else turns out to be built on sand. For 3 consecutive weeks, Wu-jae attended facility review meetings at Hansung. His meeting room was on the same floor as her lab. They kept ending up in the same spaces. The cafeteria, the corridor, the hospital's rooftop garden where she went between data sessions to think, and where he began appearing on the 3rd week without explanation. "You come here to think," she said the 3rd time. "Yes," he said. "So do I." "I know," he said. "That's slightly alarming." "Yes," he said. "Probably." She looked at him. Seoul spread below them 20 floors down, 10 million people moving through their lives, unaware of these 2 people on this rooftop deciding how much to say. The wind moved across the garden. A ventilation unit hummed somewhere below. The sky was the pale gray of early afternoon Seoul. She'd learned something about his silences by now. They weren't empty. They were full of things he was deciding. "What happened 7 years ago?" she asked. He turned. "Why?" "Because you laugh at nothing. People who've always been serious don't carry it the same way as people who stopped. You stopped." A long silence. The city breathed below them. "My mother died," he said. "In a hospital. Not this one." "I'm sorry," she said. She was in pain for 2 years. The treatment protocol was wrong from the beginning. The physician knew it was wrong. He continued it because the correct protocol was more expensive. The insurance structure made it inconvenient. Kazuya went very still. "What was the condition?" she asked. He told her. It was the exact condition her research addressed. She looked at him for a long time. Something moved through her that wasn't yet grief but was related to it. The specific feeling of understanding, all at once, why something has the weight it has. "That's why you're interested in my research," she said slowly. "That's why I came to this hospital in the first place, 2 years ago. When I heard about the fellowship." "You arranged the fellowship." "No, I funded the building that houses the lab. The fellowship already existed. I just made sure the lab was equipped. The equipment I shipped from Atlanta." "Yes. You knew about it." "I knew the lab needed it." She stood up. She walked to the rooftop edge. Seoul stretched out in every direction, indifferent. Enormous. "You should have told me," she said. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" "Because you would have treated it as an obligation. And I wanted to see what you'd do without one." She turned. "That's manipulative." "Yes," he said. "And you're not sorry." "I'm not sorry I know what I know about you now. I'm sorry I couldn't find a better way to learn it. She looked at him for a long time. Then she sat back down beside him. Neither of them spoke. The city hummed below. A man who hadn't laughed in 7 years sat with his hands folded and his eyes on the skyline, trying to figure out what to do with something he hadn't planned for and had no procedure to handle. 4 months ago, he'd come to this hospital for one reason. It had nothing to do with the woman sitting next to him. Now he couldn't explain why he kept ending up on this rooftop. He didn't try to explain it. He just stayed. Her preliminary findings were ready. 12 physicians, 2 external reviewers, airtight data, clean methodology, the first conclusive evidence that Bake Pharma's flagship neurological compound produced the exact cellular degradation it claimed to prevent. $4 billion of annual revenue built on a lie. Her evidence said so, quietly, precisely, without ambiguity. Within 4 hours, the legal notice arrived. Bake Pharma's team had filed a formal intellectual property challenge claiming her research methodology incorporated proprietary frameworks without licensing, designed specifically to freeze publication, not to win an argument, to prevent the argument from ever reaching a room where it could be lost. She called Wu Jie. I know, he said, before she finished explaining. How do you know? Because Baek Sung-kyu is in my building right now, in a meeting I didn't schedule. Who is Baek Sung-kyu to you? Silence. Nothing, he said. He's nothing to me. Wu Ye. He's my biological father. He left when I was 4. He's been using my organization's territory to launder Baek Pharma revenue for 3 years without my knowledge. And he's been trying to destroy your research for 6 months because your findings will cost him $4 billion annually. Silence. Are you all right? She asked. A pause. Longer than usual. No, he said. But I will be. What he didn't tell her was the rest. The part his most trusted advisor had just delivered privately. The money laundering ran through his network. If Beck's operation collapsed in prosecution, Wu Jie went down with it unless he could prove he hadn't known. Proving a negative to a hostile prosecution was not straightforward. He was at risk because of his father. Again, just differently than the first time. The first time he'd been 4 years old and had no choice. He was 37 now. Keziah and Su Jin had dinner. She told her about Beck. The IP challenge. The connection to Wu Jie. The impossible position of a man being hunted by a father who'd abandoned him decades ago. She processed it out loud, turning the story over in the telling, trying to find its shape. Sujin listened. She asked specific questions. The next morning, Baek Pharma's legal team had information that could only have come from that dinner. Keziah realized it in the afternoon. She sat with it for 3 hours. The particular grief of understanding a betrayal from someone you genuinely liked, not anger, something quieter, sadder, more final. She had made one error. She'd trusted the warmth because the warmth had felt real. It was real. That was the worst part. She went to Sujin's office. She closed the door. She laid out exactly what she knew, the timing, the specific information that had leaked, the only person who could have had it. Sujin didn't deny it immediately. She tried to reframe. She talked about hospital politics, about things Keziah didn't understand. How long have you known Shin Wu Jie? Kezia said. Sujin stopped. 2 years, she said finally. And you're in love with him. Sujin's expression answered before she did. It was not a complicated expression. It was the expression of someone who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and is exhausted by the holding. You need to leave Seoul, Sujin said. You came here to do research. You've done it. Take your findings and go back to Atlanta. My findings are frozen. I can unfreeze them. I have access. If you leave. Keziah looked at her. You're bribing me to leave. I'm offering you a way out. I don't take ways out. I take the door I walked in through. She left. She went to the rooftop. She stood in the cold and looked at Seoul and felt the weight of every person in this building who had appeared to be one thing and turned out to be another. Wu Jie found her there an hour later. She told him everything, including the part about Su Jin. Are you angry? He asked. At her? No, she said. Sad for her. She made herself into a weapon for someone who doesn't know she exists in that way. That's the saddest thing I've heard in a long time. He looked at her. She was talking about Sujin. He was thinking about something that didn't have a name yet, but that was getting harder to hold at the same careful distance he'd been keeping it. Keziah, he said. Don't, she said. Not yet. I'm still processing. He nodded. He sat beside her in the cold without speaking and without leaving. He stayed until she was ready to go back inside. She noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. Inspector Gong returned. Not for questions this time. A formal material witness order. Keziah was required to provide testimony in the financial crimes investigation, the investigation into the Shin clan's involvement in Beck Pharma's money laundering operation. He delivered it at the hospital reception desk, middle of the working day, in front of staff. He wanted the hospital to see that the foreign research fellow was entangled with a criminal organization. The humiliation was deliberate, calculated, a message dressed in legal process. She received the order with complete composure. She thanked him. She asked for 48 hours to consult legal representation. Then she went to Wu Jie. His most trusted advisor had already brought him the information. Gong Tai-sik was Baek Sung-kyu's nephew. The financial crimes investigation wasn't independent. It was a mechanism. Use Keziah as leverage. Force Wu Jie into a business arrangement with Beck, or watch the woman he'd been protecting get destroyed by testimony she didn't even know was being misused. A father using a woman to coerce the son he'd abandoned. He's using you, Wu Jie told her, to get to me. Your testimony won't go toward the financial crimes case. It'll be used to force a business arrangement between my organization and my father's corporation. How do you know? Because that's what my father does. He finds the thing you're protecting, and he stands next to it. Signed. She looked at him. I'm the thing you're protecting, she said. He looked at her directly. Not around it. Not past it. Yes, he said. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not going to testify to something I don't believe is true, whatever they threaten. I know, he said. But I need you to tell me everything. All of it. Everything your organization does. Everything that connects to Beck. I need to know exactly what I'm choosing. He looked at her for a long time. This woman who had stood in the wreckage of her equipment and said, "Times, pick it up." Who had been offered a way out and said, "Times, I take the door I walked in through." Who was sitting in front of him now, asking for the full truth of who he was so she could decide with full knowledge. That'll take a while, he said. I have time, she said. 4 days. That was what it took. Keziah had been reviewing the IP challenge documents, the frameworks Baek Pharma claimed she'd used without licensing. Something in the specific language was wrong. Those frameworks didn't match Baek Pharma's published patents. They matched something internal to Hansung Medical Center. She traced it, thread by thread, document by document. And on the 4th day, she found it. Director Hwang Jun-sik's private research file, 18 months of work, built on her methodology, using her data, structured under a consortium of names that placed his name first and hers nowhere. Not in the byline, not in the methodology credits, nowhere. As if she had never existed. As if 3 months of data she had nearly destroyed herself producing had grown organically from Korean academic soil without a black woman from Atlanta spending 19-hour days alone in a cold laboratory. She organized the documentation. She went to his office. He was ready for her. She could tell from the first second he had rehearsed this moment. He explained it as standard academic consortium practice. He said her contribution would appear in supplementary materials. He said she should be grateful her work would reach publication through the consortium's established channels. He said all of this with the smooth calm of a man who has told himself this story so many times, it has started to feel like the truth. She let him finish. She had been recording him from the moment she walked in. Then she turned and walked out. What Hwang didn't know, what Wu Jie's advisor had discovered that morning and delivered immediately, was that Hwang's consortium wasn't a hospital entity. It was a private commercial venture. He had been using hospital resources, hospital staff, and a hospital fellowship recipient for personal commercial gain. That wasn't academic misconduct. That was fraud. And the hospital sat on Wu Jie's property, which made what happened inside it Wu Jie's business. He was standing in the corridor when she walked out. He'd heard the end of it through the office wall. She held up her phone. "So did this," she said. For the first time in 7 years, Shin Woo-jae came close to smiling. 7 years. He hadn't come close in 7 years. She held up a phone, and he almost laughed, and he didn't know what to do with that. He stood in the corridor and didn't move for a moment. Then he composed himself. Then he walked. But she had seen it. Then everything broke at once. Lim's falsified outcome report reached the medical board. He was suspended pending investigation. His countercomplaint against Keziah collapsed with him. Huang's recording reached 3 legal channels simultaneously: the hospital board, the fellowship committee in Atlanta, an academic fraud investigation unit. His consortium was dissolved before it could publish a single page. Keziah's research was released from every IP claim Beck Pharma had filed. Inspector Gong's investigation was referred to a prosecutorial oversight committee when his relationship to Baek Sung-kyu was formally documented. The material witness order against Keziah was withdrawn. Baek Sung-kyu was exposed, the money laundering. The $4 billion compound built on fraudulent science. The network of planted people, weaponized relationships, 16 years of architecture. All of it was coming down. But Woo-jae was still exposed. His organization's unknowing involvement in Beck's operation was still a thread that could, if pulled correctly, unravel 3 decades of what he'd built. He'd been constructing the proof for 3 weeks. He was almost there. Then Na Young-hee came to his office. 42 years old, 16 years with the Shin clan, his most trusted advisor, the person who had briefed him on every development, who had managed his intelligence operation with precision and calm, who had, in these past weeks, been the source of almost every piece of information that had allowed him to survive each new threat. She sat across from him. She put a small drive on his desk, and she told him everything. 16 years of it. Every report she'd filed to Baek Sung-kyu. Every decision she'd quietly shaped from inside his organization. She was the one who had placed Soo-jin inside the hospital. She was the one who'd connected Inspector Gong to Baek. She was the connective tissue between every person who had tried, from different directions, to destroy what Woo-jae had built. She hadn't started as a villain. She'd been placed before he inherited the clan when he was 22 years old, and inheriting an empire placed by Baek when Baek believed this would resolve in months. 16 years later, she had watched that 22-year-old become someone she couldn't finish betraying. The drive contained everything. Her full intelligence record, Baek's complete operation, every communication proving Woo-jae's organization had no knowledge of the laundering. "Why?" he said. "Because he was going to kill you," she said. "Not professionally. He contracted it. Last week, when everything started collapsing, you were the liability. And you stopped it." "Yes." "Why?" She looked at him for a long time. This man she had watched become something across 16 years, while she remained the lie beneath him. "Because I watched you become something," she said, "for 16 years. And whatever I am, whatever I did, I couldn't watch that end." He looked at her. "Go," he said. She stood. She picked up nothing. She walked out of his office and didn't look back. Whatever she was carrying, 16 years of it, she carried it alone, out the door and into whatever came after. He sat with the drive on his desk for a long time, alone in a quiet office with the city outside the window and the full shape of everything that had been hidden finally visible. Then he picked up his phone. "Are you at the hospital?" he said. "Yes," Keziah said. "Go to the rooftop. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The rooftop. Evening. The air was cold and clear. Souls spread out below, lit and humming, and completely unaware of everything that had just been settled in the building beneath their feet. Keziah was there when he arrived. She'd been there 15 minutes. She'd arrived early without fully knowing why, only that when he'd said, "Times go to the rooftop," times something in her had wanted to already be there, waiting. The way you arrive early to things that matter. The city glittered below. A cold wind moved across the garden. Somewhere inside the building, her research was being prepared for submission. He sat beside her. He told her about Young-hee, about the drive. He told her the legal exposure was resolved, the documentation proved his organization's involvement was unknowing. Beck's prosecution would proceed without implicating the Shin clan. She listened to all of it. "You're free," she said. "Yes," he said. "What does that feel like?" He looked at the city for a moment. "Different from what I expected. I thought it would feel like ending something. It feels like starting something." She looked at him. "My research is going to publication," she said. "The compound will be pulled from market within 18 months. The treatment protocol your mother should have had, it's going to exist. For everyone." He looked at her. Something in his expression changed. Not soft. He wasn't a soft man, but open. The specific openness of someone who has been closed for a precise, counted number of years and is feeling, for the first time, what it costs to let that close. "I know," he said quietly. "Are you all right?" she asked. He looked at her for a long time. "You keep asking me that. You keep deserving it," she said. He looked at her, this woman who had danced in the rain when someone broke everything she'd built, who had held up her phone in a corridor and said, "Times, so did this." Who had asked, "Times, are you all right?" times when he told her his father was trying to destroy him. Who had never once, in all of this, become something smaller than herself. "Keziah," he said. "Yes. The night I found you dancing, in the rain. I stood there for 4 minutes before you saw me." "I know," she said. "I saw you at 2 minutes. I kept dancing anyway." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because you weren't laughing at me," she said. "And you weren't pitying me. You were just watching. Like it was something worth watching." "It was?" he said. "It still is?" "Yes," he said. He turned toward her. His hand came up to her face, slow, deliberate, certain. The specific certainty of a man who does nothing without knowing why. She looked at him. The city was lit below them, and Lim was suspended, and Huang was facing fraud charges, and Baek Sung-kyu was going to answer for every single thing he had done. And Shin Woo-jae, who hadn't laughed in 7 years, who had stood in the rain getting soaked through rather than stop watching a woman dance, leaned forward and kissed her. Not gently, he wasn't a gentle man, but with the specific, careful weight of someone who understands exactly what they are doing. She kissed him back the same way she did everything, fully, without reservation, like walking back through the door she came in through. When they separated, she looked at him. "You almost smiled," in Huang's corridor. "When I held up my phone." "No," he said. "You did." "Almost," he said. "Close enough," she said. He looked at her. And this time, quietly, privately, just for her he did. Not performed, not practiced, small and real, and completely his. The smile of a man who stopped 7 years ago and is starting again, here, on a rooftop, next to a woman who danced in the rain. Below them, the city went on. Her findings were changing what was possible. A treatment that hadn't existed before was beginning to exist because she had refused to leave, because she had said, "Times, pick it up," because she had gone outside into the cold and danced when there was nothing left to do but survive. She started dancing in the rain at 9 years old because she needed a way to carry what couldn't be held. She danced in the rain at 31, and a man stood in it to watch her. That was enough to begin everything. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Every story on this channel is built the same way. Real characters, real stakes, and an ending that earns itself. We'll see you in the next one.